Y'all, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order and go ahead and get started. I like to try to start on time when we can, and I don't anticipate us taking a vote on this this morning, but I do want us to discuss this bill and get going. So let's go ahead and begin as we normally do in Banks and Banking with a word of prayer. Father, we do bow and just pause and, God, remind ourselves that while we slept, God, you were on the job. And while we're busy, God, you'll continue to be on the job. And I'm so thankful that you are. Father, I thank you for America. I thank you for Georgia. Lord, I thank you for the members on this banking committee. Father, I thank you that we live in a situation where we're free to express our ideas and we don't live under the threat of military rule. But God, I thank you for the freedom that we enjoy. I pray, God, that you'd bless our time now as we meet in this committee and that we would honor you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we're here this morning to look at House Bill 673. Representative David Lucas had introduced this bill. I have not heard from him this morning. Has anybody heard from Representative Lucas this morning? He had asked that his bill be heard, and since you're all here, I want to go ahead and get into it, and maybe he'll come in while we're discussing. That'd be great if you don't mind, just to see where he's at. We're going to go ahead and move forward because we've got several other meetings going on. I appreciate you being here on time this morning. It's House Bill 673, which is in your folder, and it appears that he is making one change in the law. And if you look at the language that's underlined on lines 12 and 13, it just says no financial institution which charges a fee for cashing a check drawn on such institution shall be eligible to serve as a state depository. As I understand Representative Lucas's situation that he's explained to me is that he has a bank or banks, I'm not sure how many, but I know he has at least one in his community that is charging a fee to cash checks that are drawn on the same bank. Illustration would be if Representative Cox worked for me and I went to this particular bank that he's referring to. I wrote Clay Cox a check for $100, and it was a check from that bank that I had my money deposited in. Then that bank, even though Clay is not a customer there, but he goes to that bank that the money is drawn on, and that bank is charging, I believe, a $5 fee to cash those checks. I also want to ask if there's anybody in our audience that would like to speak to this morning. I know we've got Community Bankers Association here and Georgia Bankers Association, and before we do that, of course, I just want to ask any of the members or any questions. We're not going to vote on this today, but I do want to breach the subject, and I do think it merits discussion. Representative Cox, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll direct this towards you. My assumption is a state depository is one in which the state does business with, and so the bill essentially is contemplating a stick that if that's a practice that we would by policy, I guess, say we don't like, and our stick would be that if you behave in that manner, we're not going to put state money in your bank. Is essentially what the bill contemplates. Is that correct?
That's correct, I believe, as I understand it, and I know we have our Banking Commissioner Brasnell with us today, and we appreciate you coming this morning. And at some point, if I'd like to hear your comments in regards to maybe helping the committee better understand what it entails in being a state depository. I know there are some specifics that all the committee members may not be aware of, and it'd be good to be made aware of that. But before we get to that, let's see, is it Representative Martin?
No.
Martin, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering now. I know that some of the fees that are charged for checking accounts sometimes include a small fee for each item in that account. Would this mean that in a bank statement, say if your statement is charged a per item fee, of course those checks were drawn on that bank, would that maybe unintentionally catch those types of fees also?
I don't believe so, but that's certainly something that the subcommittee needs to take a look at if we assign it to a subcommittee this morning. I know the intention, as the author has explained to me, is, again, and I hesitate to use any name of any bank, but we'll just call it Bank A. If I had my money in Bank A and I wrote a check to you for working for me, you went to Bank A and drew, cashed your check and drew from money that was already in the bank, then the bank is charging a $5 fee for that. And the objection to that is that Representative Lucas feels like, you've already got his money in the bank, you're already making interest on it. What is the fee charged for? And of course, I know of some situations where that there may be a plant nearby, and you may have 100 customers go into that bank who keep a teller tied up all day. So there's two sides to this, but I wish Representative Lucas was here to. Were you able to get in touch with him, Representative?
He said he was 5 minutes. He said it was for flight, so he said he'd be here in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Representative Franklin, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might need to wait for Representative Lucas to get here, but I was wondering if you might know, without giving the name of this specific bank, if the bank in question is a state depository currently.
Well, I would assume, based on the bill, that
unless it's just something that he would is sending a message to, that if that bank wants to become a depository anytime in the future, then they're going to have to stop that practice.
Right. I'll let him respond to that because I don't know this. I don't want to misstate anything, but I would assume that, yes, it probably is a state depository.
And do you know how many state depositories we have?
I don't know the exact number. I get a folder. Commissioner, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you have any idea, ballpark figure?
I don't. Dan Everfall, the Office of Treasury and Fiscal Services, will provide that information.
Okay. All right. Representative Talton. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, that basically was my question. I was going to see until Representative Lucas got here, to see if the commissioner could enlighten us a little bit more on this and see what his stand was, just like you said he was going to ask them. So.
Sure. We'll have him do that in just a second. Let me get all the members' questions. That's a good point, Representative Talton. Representative Marion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you say a $5 fee, but as I know, the larger the check, the less the fee. This is a figure for all checks, $5. Okay, because yes. I know that some places, the bigger the check, the less fee sometimes you have to pay, or otherwise, a larger fee you have to pay. So my question was, it's just a flat fee of $5. That's why they're charging. That's my understanding. And again, when Representative Lucas gets here, I'll let him clear up anything I may have misstated. But I think his main issue is he doesn't have a problem, as I understand it, with someone with a bank charging a fee if it's a check from another bank. Mm-hmm. The issue is when it's drawn on the same bank that it's written from. Mm-hmm. He disagrees with that, and that's what he's trying to target here. And it's my understanding that there are numerous banks, and I would assume we'd be surprised. I don't think this was practiced very widely too long ago, but I think it's probably spread more during these difficult times. I'm sure that banks are looking for every way they can to recoup some losses, and I don't know how widespread it is, though. Let's see, Representative Kaiser.
I'm sorry, you answered my question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Representative Harden, did you have another?
No, thank you, Madam.
Okay. All right. Representative Frazier, did you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is this for all depository units? Is it also include credit unions, every banking institute
We'll let the
that
commission.
charges a fee?
Yeah, we'll let the commissioner speak to that a moment, but I think the bill only addresses bank depositories.
Thank you.
But we'll want to clarify that. Glad to have you, Representative Lucas.
Mr. Chairman, I want to apologize for being late, but I've been in line 15 minutes trying to get in the parking.
Apology accepted. We understand we've all hit traffic at different times. If you would come to the microphone, and I've tried to do a butcher presentation on your bill. I hope I haven't misstated anything, and in an effort to make sure that I haven't, we'll just start from the beginning and let you. We have House Bill 673 in front of us, and we'll turn it over to Representative Lucas at this time.
Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the committee, the reason I dropped the bill in, and I guess from personal experience, I went to Wachovia to cash my state check, and they told me it was a $5 fee. And I asked why, and they told me I did not have a personal checking account there. Although I do have a commercial account at Wachovia, but I have a personal checking account at another bank. And when the young lady told me that, I said, well, it's drawn on your bank. I said, I've got the proper ID. What's the problem? Well, our policy is that if you're not a hold a checking account here, then it's a $5 fee. So I just deposited in my commercial checking account and just came back. And then I met with the speaker and Robin about it. Robin, in turn, called the folks from Wachovia and found out that the state auditor said they weren't supposed to charge folks or employees with the where our money is on Wachovia. Well, the following week I got paid my next check. I said, let me go check this thing out. And I went back to the bank, and they refused to cash the check again. And what Robin asked me to do was to call her when I was at the teller, so I did. And we talked to the manager of the bank, and she just said it was the policy. And so she was able to get some young lady on the phone with Wachovia, and they got it worked out and said that that was supposed to be a code in I would assume the bank's computer that would tell them that. But the problem is, Mr. Chairman, is why should a person pay $5 charge on a check that's drawn on that bank and the person shows the proper ID? I can understand it if it was not on that bank, but at that bank, which means they run the check through the account prior to giving you any money to make sure the money is there. Well, that's just one of the policies. And so I met with the president of that particular bank, and he just told me that was a policy, and that we just can't have folks standing in line, our customers standing in line while other folks don't have a checking account, and we're having the teller, they're taking up the teller's time. And so what I said to him, are you telling me the banks don't make money with money? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you got the state's money. You get some deposit. Y'all make money off our money. And you're trying to tell me that because you don't have a personal checking account, which I make that decision to have my checking account whatever bank I want to, but because it was drawn on that particular bank, they can have that policy. Now, the last time they did cash the checks, but my problem is it shouldn't happen. To me, it's a cash cow. It's exactly what it is. And I don't need to get into all the ramifications, but that is the reason. And the reason I put that no bank who receives a state deposit can charge an amount on a check drawn on their bank. And that's basically what the bill does.
Mm-hmm. Any questions for Representative Lucas? We've had several already, but any further questions that you'd like to ask the author? All right. Thank you, Representative Lucas. At this time, if we could, I don't intend on us. I know we've got appropriations going on as well right now, and we've got other meetings that will begin. I don't want this to be a long, drawn-out meeting, but I think Representative Lucas has brought something to our attention that deserves discussion. And I'd like to ask at this time if the Commissioner Brazel, could at least enlighten the committee a little bit on a state depository. Does that include, as the question I think was asked earlier, is it only limited to banks? What it requires to be a state depository?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. You have to be approved by the State Depository Board, which there, I believe, are 6 members of the Depository Board. The Banking Commissioner is one of those members. But there are criteria established by that committee as to what is an acceptable institution to place them funds in. Certain parameters have to be met to ensure it's a safe and sound institution. But once it's approved by that body, that committee, which is chaired by the governor, then it is an approved institution to place state funds in.
One of the questions I remember from one of the members was, and I told him you would address it, was is this only in reference to banks, does not involve, there are no credit union depositories?
That's correct.
Okay. And Representative Peake, you had a question.
Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, can you give us an idea how many banks are we talking about? I mean, is there hundreds that would meet this criteria of a state depository?
No. In fact, in the state of Georgia, including national banks, I believe there's only about 335 or so institutions. But the number as far as approved depositories will be much, much less than that. And
do you have any idea how many that actually we have, the state has depository accounts with?
Like I say, Dan Ebersol, OTFS, is the one that really handles that and monitors that closely.
Okay.
And I apologize for that.
Representative Frazier, you recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I've also had the experience of going into a bank and had that bank's checks and have been charged a fee. What exactly is that? What does that fee, that $5 fee, go toward?
That would, like I say, the banking community can answer that better than I could, but I'm sure that's considered part of their cost, their overhead structure, administrative costs, that sort of thing, I would imagine. Just for perspective, I can just tell you that our Deputy Commissioner for Legal and Consumer Administration was just telling me a while ago that the banking department, the type charge that we're speaking of today, in which it's drawn on that bank, we considered to be prohibited to charge a fee to cash those checks. And approximately 5 years ago, there was a court case in which that was ruled that banks could charge those fees. And so national banks, of course, could do that, and then the state invoked the parity provision to allow state banks so they would not be disadvantaged to do the same. But just to give you a little perspective or history regarding these type fees.
Thank you.
Commissioner, appreciate that, and that's, you know, I remember many years ago, Speaker Tom Murphy brought this issue up, and it has since then been ruled on by the courts, as you stated. And Representative Lucas, this is a rather creative way of getting at it.
I understand what he's saying, but Representative Murphy, we have covered all the banks in the state of Georgia, not just state depository. And I think that was the ruling. I think we can control what banks do where we deposit our money. And I will say this, I'm just one. I can get my check cash. I can go back there in the bank and they'll sign the name on their way. The problem is everybody's not David Blue. And I watched little old ladies with checks that there on that bank. Well, if they're working for folks and the check is drawn on that bank, they're going to have a checking account and they charge them a $5 fee. And I just think that the other thing you have to understand, if it's WICO, we got state employees, we got correction institutions all around making a military. They want to get the check cash. They go ahead and pay the $5 so they can get the money and keep going. Not ever question. But why should you pay $5 when the check is drawn on that bank and they can check the account to see if the money's in there prior to them cashing the check?
And Representative Lucas, I think you're correct in stating that the state of Georgia has the right to set the parameters on that which we decide to be a depository and that which we decide not to be a depository. we can't legally do anything about the fee, but this, as I stated earlier, is a creative way of getting at that, and you're to be applauded for your creativity there and trying to help your constituents. Any other questions for the commissioner along the lines of a state depository? That's all right, Commissioner. Thank you. The parameters that are set for a state depository, do you know? I'm sure it's safety and soundness, as you stated earlier. I'm just wondering how many community banks do we have that are state depository banks?
There are many. But Wachovia is one of the institutions that were selected for the Streamlined Banking Project, which that has been, I think, temporarily put on hold or suspended. There are 6 agencies that were the pilot agencies in that, and they are still doing that. We're one of those pilot agencies, but they're one of the 2 institutions that were selected to be the main depositories, if you will, for the state. So that may have some bearing as well. And if I may say, the banking department does not, we're not weighing in on the bill. We're neutral on this bill. We were just simply here for reference.
Sure. Thank you. I understand that, and you didn't anticipate being called on this morning. That was
that's correct.
That's why we wanted to keep our questions along the lines of state depositories, because you know nothing about the bill. All right, Commissioner. Thank you. Anyone in the representing the banks or financial institutions that would like to speak to this briefly this morning? Well, I think that would be something the subcommittee could look into, and I think also while they may have a policy on state drawn checks, they may not have a policy on Representative Clay Cox's business that writes a check to ex-employee. Are you aware of? Okay, but so if, I guess for the committee's knowledge, if you have a state employee that is being charged a $5 fee to cash a check, then you need to let us know so that we can let the bank know they're in violation of the policy. Representative Franklin, you recognize?
Yeah. Thank you. I think you brought up a point I was wanting to make, because I think Representative Lucas's point wasn't just dealing with state employees, but that little old lady who gets the check working at the grocery store that also has that account at Wachovia. It's addressing that as well, where they're.
The only thing about this, excuse me, if I may.
You may.
The only thing about that, the federal law is kind of funny when you deal with banks. But I knew that if I dealt with Pacific, those are where we hold our money in their account.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we could make an impact there. They do. Wachovia does it. Bank of America does it. But it just so happened I went into the bank, and there was a new teller that didn't know me. And, it came up. I did pay the $5. I'm going to tell you that up front. I refused to pay. But it was just almost like you were incensed not supposed to happen according to, I think, state law. And in talking to Robin, there is a ruling that our employees are not supposed to be paying a fee on checks, state checks that are drawn on those banks. And I just happen to be the one that they got. I just told y'all got the right one this time.
Representative Lucas, thank you for bringing House Bill 673 to us, and I think we've introduced the subject enough to go ahead and assign it to subcommittee at this point. Steve Bridges, did you have anything you wanted to say in regards to community banks?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Bridges, represent the Community Bankers Association, and try to address a couple of things, questions that have been asked. I think the Commissioner has stated properly that the proper people who need to ask about the number of state depositories is Dan Emersole at the Office of Treasury and Fiscal Services. But in rough numbers, I would tell you, based on some of my knowledge, that I think that'd probably be around 100 or less of the 300-something banks in the state. But the streamlined banking project, my understanding too of the contract that requires that the fee not be charged, that was a part of that project, if you will, whenever the streamlined banking project came in. And those that bid on that signed that contract. Or those that, excuse me, not those that bid on it, but those that won those contracts, they signed the contract saying they would not charge. And as has already been stated, I wouldn't name a bank except it's already been named, and Wachovia was one of those that was involved in that, as has already been said. The majority, I don't have any hard and fast statistics on this, so I'm going to be very honest about that. The majority of community banks that I'm aware of do not charge a fee for cashing a check, what they would refer to as an on-us check, check drawn on them, whether the person has an account there or not. Now, there's probably the majority of them, or many of them, do charge a fee for a check drawn on another bank. And to address one of the things that was said about what that fee is for, Commissioner's already stated part of it, but if it is a check drawn on another bank, there's risk associated with the bank taking that check. If that's presented at the other bank and people don't have the money there, then they're out that money. So there's risk associated with it. So the fee, in addition to covering administrative overhead and so forth, like the Commissioner has said, it's a charge for the risk that they're taking. Now, I do understand Representative Lucas's point that if the check is drawn on the bank, then the bank can check their own records and make sure that money is there before they pay the check. So I do understand that. The only instances that I'm aware of in community banks where that a fee is charged in an on-us check situation is something similar to what the chairman mentioned, and Representative Lucas, this may have been before you came in, I'm not sure, but is a situation where that there's a large volume of employees that come to the bank and are cashing those checks from a particular employer in a community, and they do keep the tellers tied up for substantial periods of time and that sort of thing. And if those people have a checking account there, they would not be charged, but if they don't have a checking account there, in some cases they do charge that. But that is in terms of total number of banks, that is a few banks that charge even in that situation. So, anybody has any questions that we go along on this, I'll be glad to try to respond.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and assign the bill to Financial Institutions and Services, chaired by Calvin Hill. And, of course, we've already passed the 30th day, so there's no action that would be taken this legislative session anyway. But I'll be asking Chairman Hill to at least have, at a minimum, one meeting between now and next session and take a closer look at this. And in case I forget, I know a question that I'd like for the subcommittee to look at is, let's play this all the way out and say that it were to be put into law, what position would that put us in with the state's money in regards to, are there enough depositories out there by eliminating the ones we're talking about that can handle under the current guidelines that we have? That's a pretty important question to look at. But at this time, we'll go ahead and assign it there, and we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Representative Lucas, and we'll move forward.